No long intro, no wasting time, just content that delivers. If you like videos that get straight to the point, subscribe now and enjoy what's coming next.
It was a Sunday morning in October, the kind of morning where the light comes in sideways through the kitchen blinds and makes everything look golden. I remember thinking that. I remember noticing the light before I noticed the folder on the table. My father was already dressed. He was always already dressed. In 26 years, I had never once seen Richard Calloway in pajamas. He sat at the head of the table, his coffee untouched, his reading glasses pushed up to his forehead, and a manila folder open in front of him. He didn't look up when I walked in. "Sit down, Maya," he said. I sat. He slid the folder across the table. Inside was a single printed email. It was from the Dean of Columbia Law School. It was addressed to my father. Apparently, when you stop showing up to class for 6 weeks straight, the school eventually stops sending notices to your student email and starts calling your emergency contact. I had never thought to change that contact. My mother came in from the hallway. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, her reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck, still in her weekend blazer because even on Sundays, she dressed like she was due in court at 9. In a way, she always was. "How long?" my father asked, still not looking at me. "Since April," I said. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard. My father, Richard Calloway, was a named partner at Calloway and Hess, one of the 5 most respected corporate law firms in Manhattan. His name was literally on the building. His photograph was literally on the website under a tab that said, "Our Legacy." My mother, the Honorable Diane Calloway, had been a federal judge for 11 years. My older brother, Tyler, was a second-year associate at the same firm where my father worked, already being groomed for a trajectory that would eventually land his name on the building too. And then there was me, the one who had spent the last 6 weeks, while supposedly attending constitutional law and federal civil procedure, sitting in a rented studio space in Bushwick, learning how to tile a backsplash. "You're throwing away everything," my mother said. Her voice didn't shake. It never shook. She saved the shaking for verdicts that didn't go the way she expected. "I'm not throwing anything away," I said. "I'm choosing something different." My father finally looked up. He had a particular expression he used in depositions. I had seen it on video once, a kind of flat, measuring stillness, like he was deciding which angle to take before he said a single word. He turned it on me now. "You were going to be extraordinary," he said. "You had a full scholarship. You had the grades. You had the name." He closed the folder. "And you threw it away to do what exactly? Decorate rooms?" "Design," I said quietly. "Interior architecture. Don't correct me in my own house." Have you ever been told that the thing you love most is embarrassing? That the hours you pour into something beautiful and careful and yours is just a hobby at best and a humiliation at worst? If you have, leave a comment below. I want to hear your story. I read every single one. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I had spent the last 6 weeks steeling myself for exactly this conversation, and I had made myself a promise that I would not beg. I pushed back my chair and stood up. "I'll get my things," I said. "If you walk out that door," my father said, "you walk out for good. Don't expect this family to fund a midlife crisis you're having at 26. I'm not asking you to fund anything. Then don't come back asking." I walked upstairs. I packed one suitcase. I took my laptop, my sketchbooks, a box of drafting pencils I had owned since high school, and every piece of clothing I could fit in a carry-on duffel. I left the rest. I left the bedroom my mother had designed to look like a hotel suite. I left the framed photos of Tyler and me at his law school graduation, me in the background smiling with my mouth only. I left the copy of the blue book that my father had given me on my first day of law school, inscribed in his small, precise handwriting, "The Callaways win." I took a cab to a friend's couch in Astoria. I had $4,000 in a personal checking account my parents didn't know about, money I had saved from 3 summers of waitressing during undergrad because some part of me had always known I might need an exit. I sat on that couch in the dark at midnight, listening to the elevated train rattle past the window, and I felt, underneath all of the fear, something I hadn't felt in years: relief. The following Monday, I got a job at a paint and tile showroom in Long Island City, $60 a day under the table, stocking shelves and running samples to contractors who came in with blueprints rolled under their arms. My entire education, 4 years of undergraduate honors work at Georgetown and 1 semester of Columbia Law, and I was sweeping grout dust off a concrete floor. I didn't tell anyone I knew. I changed my Instagram to private and stopped answering texts from people connected to my parents. My world shrank down to that showroom, my friend's pull-out couch, and the sketchbooks I filled every night after dinner. But the sketchbooks were everything. I had always sketched. Since I was 12 years old, I had been drawing rooms, not furniture catalogs, not Pinterest boards, actual rooms, with sight lines and light sources and the way materials would feel against each other. In law school, I had sketched in the margins of my contracts casebook until the professor had called on me in front of 60 people, and I hadn't known the answer because I had been working out how to tile a wet room using large format, limestone with a linear drain. I had been humiliated in front of the entire class. I had also finished the sketch on the subway home and thought it was the best thing I had designed in months. At the showroom, I started talking to the contractors. Not in an annoying way, just the way you talk to people when you're both staring at the same wall of marble samples at 8 in the morning. I asked questions. I learned the difference between what things cost and what things were worth. I learned what clients actually wanted versus what they said they wanted. I learned how a room fails, not from too little money, but from too little understanding of how humans move through space. One of the contractors, a woman named Greta, started bringing me her project photos. She was rough-spoken and precise and had been renovating brownstones in Brooklyn for 20 years. She looked at my sketchbook one afternoon and said, without ceremony, "These are good. You know that, right?" I said I was starting to think so. She said, "I'm doing a whole floor gut renovation in Carroll Gardens. Owner wants high-end residential, but she can't afford a big firm. I need someone to do the interiors. I'll pay you a flat rate. It's not much." It wasn't much. It was $900. But I took photographs of every room before I started and after I finished. And when the owner posted them on her neighborhood Facebook group, 3 people asked who had done the design. That was how it started. I was not overnight. I want to be honest about that because I think stories like mine sometimes get told as if there was a single door that opened and everything changed at once. It wasn't like that. It was 18 months of sleeping on a pull-out couch, and then a room in a shared apartment in Ridgewood, and then a slightly less bad apartment in Crown Heights. It was saying yes to every project regardless of size, a nursery here, a rental refresh there, a restaurant bathroom that someone later photographed for a design blog without paying me or crediting me, which I only found out about 6 months later. It was learning to write contracts after that. It was learning to price my work after I realized I had been severely underbidding because I was so afraid of being told no that I was practically giving myself away. The mentor who changed that was a woman named Carol Vance. Carol was 61 years old and had been running a boutique residential design firm in the West Village for over 2 decades. She was known for a kind of rigorous warmth in her work, rooms that felt expensive, not because of what was in them, but because of how intelligently they were organized. I had emailed her cold after seeing an interview with her in a design publication. I told her I had no formal design degree, that I had been doing this for about a year, and that I would work for free in exchange for her honest critique of my portfolio. She replied in 48 hours. She said, "I don't need free labor, but I'll meet you for coffee." We met at a place in the West Village on a Tuesday morning, and she looked at my portfolio for 20 minutes without saying a word. Then she closed the iPad and looked at me and said, "You understand proportion instinctively. That's not teachable. Everything else is." She paused. "You're undercharging by about 300%, you know." I said I suspected that. She said, "Come work with me properly. I'll pay you. In return, you'll work harder than you've worked at anything." I said that was fine. I had nothing to lose. What Carol gave me that year was not just skill. It was language. The ability to explain to a client not just what I was doing, but why it mattered, why the placement of a single window seat changed the entire emotional register of a room, why the right material in the wrong finish was worse than no material at all. She was exacting and specific, and she had no patience for vagueness, which suited me perfectly because I had grown up in a household where vagueness was used as a weapon, where things were implied and never said outright, where love was communicated through achievement and its absence was communicated through silence. Carol said things directly. It was the most radical thing I had ever encountered in a professional relationship. By the time I had been working with her for 8 months, I was handling 3 of her smaller projects independently. I had moved into my own apartment, a 1-bedroom in Bed-Stuy that I had renovated myself on a tight budget in a way that made every single person who walked into it ask me to do the same for them. I had a real client list. I had a real portfolio. I had stopped being afraid of the number at the bottom of my invoices. Then came the Meridian. The Meridian was a 60-room boutique hotel in Nashville that had been struggling since its opening 2 years prior. It had a beautiful bones, a converted 1920s warehouse with original brick and timber framing, but its interiors had been designed by someone whose idea of warm luxury involved a great deal of distressed leather and Edison bulbs in a way that had felt trend-forward in 2019 and dated immediately after. The ownership group had come to Carol looking for someone to lead a full redesign on a compressed timeline and a budget that was significant but not lavish. Carol gave it to me. I want to be honest about what it felt like to be handed that project. It felt terrifying. Not exciting terrifying, just plain terrifying. I sat with the original drawings for a week before I touched a single sample. I walked the property twice, once in the morning and once at 11 at night, watching how the light moved and how the guests moved and where the energy of the building wanted to go but wasn't being allowed to go. I listened to the staff. I talked to the housekeepers about what made rooms hard to clean, which tells you more about a design's intelligence than any review ever will. And then I started drawing. The concept I landed on was what I called earned warmth. No manufactured patina, no artificially aged surfaces. Instead, materials that would develop character honestly over time, hand-plastered walls, unlacquered brass, textiles that would soften with use. Rooms designed to feel like they had been lived in thoughtfully, not staged for a camera. The renovation took 4 months. I was on site 3 days a week. I made decisions fast when I needed to and slowly when the decision deserved slowness, and I learned to tell the difference. When the final room was finished, and I walked through the entire property alone at 6 a.m. before anyone else arrived, I stood in the lobby with the morning light coming through the high warehouse windows, and I felt something close to what I imagine winning a case in court must feel like. Not triumph exactly, more like rightness, the sense that a thing had been resolved correctly. The Meridian opened to extraordinary reviews. Design publications ran the photos. Travel publications called it one of the best new hotel interiors in the American South. The ownership group came to me directly, bypassing Carol entirely, and asked if I would consider a contract to redesign 2 additional properties in their portfolio. The contract was for $4.2 million. I need to tell you what I felt when I read that number, because I think it matters. I did not feel rich. I did not feel victorious. I felt like a fraud. I sat in my apartment in Bed-Stuy staring at the contract, and the only thought in my head was, I am a person who quit law school and slept on a couch for a year and a half, and I do not know how to be a person who signs a $4 million contract. My father saves corporations. My mother interprets federal law. My brother argues at partner level. They do things that matter. I make rooms look beautiful. Who am I to be worth this? I called Carol. I said, I think there's been a mistake. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Maya, imposter syndrome is the tax that talented people pay for being talented in a world that didn't expect it from them. You have 30 seconds to feel it, and then you sign the contract. I signed the contract. The money was deposited in 3 installments over 14 months. After taxes and business expenses and paying my small team, I had approximately $2.8 million. I did not go looking for a mansion. I bought a building, a 3-story mixed-use property in Nashville, 10 minutes from the Meridian, in a neighborhood that reminded me of what Brooklyn had felt like before everything got too expensive. The ground floor I converted into a studio space, open to the street, where I began mentoring early career designers, specifically people who had arrived at design sideways, without formal credentials, without family money, without the safety net of a name. The second floor became my office. The third floor became my apartment, which I designed slowly and carefully over 18 months, which I am still not entirely finished with, and which I think will probably never be entirely finished, because I have accepted that designing your own home is the longest project a designer ever undertakes. I was not looking for press. I was not sending out pitches. I had my work and my building and my team and Carol, who had started coming to Nashville quarterly to do guest critiques with the mentorship group. That was enough, more than enough. And then Architectural Digest ran the story. It was not a story I had agreed to, not exactly. A journalist had reached out 6 months earlier, and I had said I would think about it, and then I had been extremely busy and had essentially forgotten about the whole thing. And then one morning, I woke up to 47 text messages and a phone call from Carol, who was laughing, which I had never heard her do on the phone. The article was titled, "The Dropout Who Redesigned What Luxury Means." It ran 6 pages. It had photographs of the Meridian and my building and my half-finished apartment, and a portrait of me standing in the studio space with 3 of my mentorship students. It talked about my background in law. It talked about the Meridian contract. It mentioned in the second paragraph that I had left Columbia Law School at 26 after what the journalist described as a significant personal reckoning with my family's expectations, and that I had built my career entirely without family support or connections. I read the article 3 times, I felt proud in a way that was unfamiliar to me, a quiet kind of proud, without the anxious performance that had always accompanied any achievement I had ever produced for my family. I shared it once, on the studio's public account, not my personal one, and then I went back to work. 11 days later, my brother called. I almost didn't recognize the number. I hadn't spoken to anyone in my family in just over 2 years. Tyler's name wasn't saved in my new phone, but something made me look twice at the 212 area code, and something made me answer. Maya. His voice was easy, smooth, the voice he used at client dinners. Hey, it's Tyler. I waited. I saw the piece, he said. In AD. Really impressive. Really. I had no idea. A pause. Mom and Dad saw it too. Still, I said nothing. We were talking, he continued, and his tone shifted just slightly, just enough that I could hear the architecture of what was coming, and we all agreed it's been way too long. It's silly, right, to let time just pass like this. We thought maybe we could come down to Nashville, see what you've built, reconnect properly. Reconnect. I heard that word and felt the temperature of the room change around me. They had not called when I left. They had not called when I was stocking tile samples for $60 a day. They had not called on my birthday, either birthday, in the 2 years I had been gone. My mother had not called. My father had not called. Tyler had sent one text 11 months after I left that said, "Hope you're okay," and to which I had never responded. When I was no one they were interested in, I was as good as invisible. Now there was a 6-page spread in Architectural Digest. Now there was a $4 million hotel contract and a building with my name on the lease. Now they wanted to reconnect. I understood exactly what was happening. I had grown up watching my father build relationships the same way he built legal strategies, always with an end in mind, always with the question of what this relationship could eventually yield. It was not that he was a bad man. He was a precise one. He understood the world as a series of assets and liabilities, and for the first time in my life, I had moved from the liability column into the asset column, and the family portfolio was being adjusted accordingly. Sure, I said. My voice was even. Come Saturday. They arrived the way my family always arrived anywhere, efficiently, without warmth, in business attire even for a weekend in Tennessee. My father in a sport coat. My mother in a camel-colored wrap dress that she wore with the same composure she wore in court. Tyler in a collared shirt, looking slightly more human than I remembered, though not by much. I met them at the door of the building. I watched my father's eyes do the thing they always did, moving quickly, cataloging, calculating square footage, location, probable property value. My mother looked at the facade and said, "It's interesting," in the tone she used when she meant I would not have chosen this. I took them through the ground floor studio first. 3 of my mentorship students were there working, which I had not arranged on purpose. They were just there because it was a Saturday, and they were dedicated. And I watched my father's face as he moved through a room full of young people with drawings pinned to the walls and material samples spread across work tables, and a kind of creative energy that was the direct opposite of the controlled, airless precision of his own offices. "This is the studio," I said. "I run a mentorship program here for designers who came to the field through unconventional paths." "Charitable," my mother said. "It's not charity," I said. "They pay a reduced fee, and I benefit from their perspectives. It's an exchange." Upstairs, I showed them the office, the project wall, the current work in progress. Tyler asked a few questions about the hotel projects that were genuine questions, I think, the closest he had come to actual curiosity. My father said very little. He moved through each space with his hands in his pockets, his expression giving nothing away. We had lunch on the top floor, the apartment, at the long, raw-edge walnut table I had designed myself and had built by a woodworker in East Nashville. The food was from a restaurant nearby that I loved, brought in containers that my assistant had laid out properly because I did not have time to cook, and I no longer performed domesticity to make people comfortable. My mother commented on the textures of the walls. My father cut his food into precise squares. Tyler looked at his phone twice and then seemed to remember he was supposed to be on better behavior. It was my father who finally said it. He set his fork down. He touched his napkin to his mouth. He looked at the window, not at me, which I recognized as his tell, the slight deflection, before he made his real argument. "Maya," he said, "I want you to know that what you've built here is impressive. That's not something I say lightly." "I know," I said. He paused, recalibrating. He had not expected me to simply receive a compliment without visible emotion. "I've been speaking with some colleagues," he continued. "The firm is considering a significant expansion, a new division. We're exploring alternative funding structures, and I thought, given your current position, You might be interested in a conversation about participating. Participating how? I said. An investment, my mother said. Joining in with the smooth, practiced ease of a co-counsel who knows exactly when to step in. As a family investment, Tyler is being positioned to lead the new division. It would be a significant opportunity for all of us. I looked at Tyler. He was looking at the walnut table. He had the grace to look slightly ill. How much? I said. My father named a number. It was not an unreasonable number in the abstract. It was approximately what I had earned in the first year after the Meridian contract. It was also, very precisely, an amount he would have known I could access without it constituting a hardship, which meant he had done the math before he got on the plane, which meant this was not a casual family lunch. This was a prepared ask. This was a pitch. I sat with it for a moment. I let the silence work the way Carol had taught me. Silences could work in a negotiation, not aggressively, just firmly, the way a well-placed wall defines the shape of a room. Then I said, no. My father's head came up. The word landed on him the way the word never had when I was growing up. Because when I was growing up, I had never said it. No? He repeated. No, I said again. I won't be investing in the firm. Maya, my mother began. Let me finish, I said. And here is the thing that surprised me most. My voice was completely steady. There was no tremble in it, no old familiar contraction in my chest that used to come whenever I was about to disagree with either of them. I was sitting in a room I had designed, in a building I owned, at a table I had made, and I was 30 years old and I was fine. I know why you're here, I said, and I don't mean Nashville. I mean I know why you're here at this table after 2 years of silence. You saw the article. You did the math. You decided I had moved from a liability into an asset, and you recalculated. That's how this family has always worked. I know that now. I didn't have the language for it when I was younger, but I do now. My father started to speak. I raised one hand gently. I spent 26 years trying to earn approval that was never actually available to me, I said. It was always conditional, always tied to performance. I was not your daughter. I was your candidate, the one who was supposed to carry a version of the Calloway name into law and reflect it back on you correctly. When I didn't, you removed me. Not with anger, just cleanly. The way you'd remove an underperforming associate. Tyler looked up from the table. Something moved across his face that I hadn't expected. Something that looked almost like recognition. What I built here, I said, I built without your name, without your money, without your network or your contacts or a single introduction from anyone connected to this family. Every client I have came to me because of the work. Every dollar I have came from the work. That is mine in a way that nothing I had before was ever mine. My mother's mouth was a thin line. My father had gone very still. I'm not angry at you, I said, and I meant it, which was the part that would have surprised me most if I had imagined this conversation a year ago. I think you built the only family you knew how to build, but it was not a family I could live in, and I am not going to invest in an expansion of it, financial or otherwise. I stood up. The guest rooms are ready, I said. You're welcome to stay tonight and drive to the airport in the morning, or I can call you a car right now. Either is fine with me. My father stood. He was a tall man, and he had always used his height the way he used silence, as a form of pressure. It didn't land the way it used to. He looked at me for a long moment, and I think what he was looking for was the version of me that would eventually blink, the 26-year-old who had once spent a full hour revising a law school essay because he had said the opening sentence wasn't strong enough. That version was not present. He nodded once. We'll take the car, he said. They left within the hour. My mother paused at the door and looked back at me with an expression I couldn't entirely read, something between assessment and something older and less certain. She opened her mouth and then closed it again. Tyler put his hand briefly on my arm as he passed, which was the most physical affection he had shown me in years. He didn't say anything either. There was nothing to say. I stood on the sidewalk and watched the car pull away, and then I went back inside. That evening, Carol came over, which she often does when she's in Nashville, and we sat on the roof terrace I had built above the studio and drank wine while the city went orange and then purple in the distance. I told her what had happened, and she listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I love most about her. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "How do you feel?" I thought about it. Like a room that finally has the right light, I said. She laughed. That's the most designer answer I've ever heard. It has been 8 months since that Sunday. The second hotel project is in construction and the third is in schematic design. And I have just been approached about a residential tower in Austin that would be the largest project I have ever taken on. My mentorship cohort has grown to 11 people. 2 of them have landed their first independent commissions. One of them A 24-year-old from Memphis who taught herself drafting on YouTube after aging out of foster care just got featured in a local design publication. I framed it and hung it in the studio. Tyler has texted me twice since the lunch. The first time was a single line. "I've been thinking about what you said." I responded, "Take your time." The second time he sent a photo, a design sketchbook, half filled, with a note that said, "I've been doing this since I was a kid. Never told anyone." I called him that time. We talked for an hour. I don't know what will come of it, but it felt like the beginning of a real conversation, maybe the first one we'd ever had. My father has not been in touch. My mother sent a brief email 3 weeks after the lunch, thanking me for the hospitality. It was polite and precise, and signed with her full name, Diane Calloway, as though I might not know who she was. I wrote back one line, "You're welcome. Take care of yourself." That was all, and it was enough. My name is Maya Calloway. I left law school at 26 with $4,000 and a suitcase and a box of drafting pencils, and I built something that is entirely, unmistakably mine. Not because I was trying to prove anything to anyone. I stopped needing to prove things to people who had already decided what I was worth. I built it because the work was true, because it reflected something real about how I see the world, because when I walk into a room I have designed, I feel the kind of wholeness that no title on a door and no name on a building ever gave me. What are you building? Not to prove something, not to win something. What are you building because it is the truest version of what you have to give? Tell me in the comments. I want to know.